Hello and welcome to what day are we on? Day 3 of week 3. We are getting into the workplace domain. The workplace domain is where HR meets operations, and it covers how we design, support, and maintain the systems that make the employee experience and the business work. These aren't just background processes, they're how HR earns trust, delivers value, and proves our strategic seat at the table. So whether you're optimizing a service model, managing risk, or measuring effectiveness, this domain is all about building an HR function that drives results. So the functional area we're going to focus on first is structure of the HR function. So this is how HR is organized to deliver services efficiently and strategically. We're first going to go into approaches to HR function and service models. When it comes to centralized human resources, all HR services are managed from a central location or team. So for example, a hospital chain with one corporate HR team handling all policies and benefits for every facility. So you should look for keywords like standardization, cost efficiency, or uniform compliance. Decentralized is when HR is handled at the local level with site-specific teams making decisions. So, for example, a global tech company where each regional office has its own HR team for hiring and compliance. So that may appear in scenarios where local flexibility or cultural customization is needed. And then global resources is when central HR functions support multiple countries or business units with global systems and standards. So for example, an international nonprofit using a global HRIS and unified onboarding platform across 12 countries. So for the test angle, look for cross-border consistency, compliance, or global talent management. Next, we're going to get into approaches to HR structural models. So Center of Excellence, or COE, is the specialized teams that develop best practices and provide expert guidance. So for example, a financial firm has a Center of Excellence for leadership development that supports all departments. COEs are often used in large or complex organizations needing deep specialization. Shared services is a service model where routine HR tasks like payroll or benefits are centralized and provided to all business units. So, for example, a university with one HR service center for leave management and benefits. So these models aim for efficiency, consistency, and cost savings. Business partners are HR pros who are embedded with business units to provide strategic support. So an HRBP working directly with the sales team to manage workforce planning and engagement, for example. These roles are strategic, not transactional, and they align people strategy with business goals. And then Matrix combines elements of multiple models. For example, COE, HRBP, shared services, all together. So for example, a manufacturing company where local HRBPs partner with centralized COEs for policy and a shared service team runs payroll. Matrix structures show up in global or highly complex organizations, often in case-based questions. Bonus concepts that SHRM may ask about: generalist versus specialist. Know the difference. Generalists handle a broad range of HR, while specialists go deep in areas like compensation or benefits. Outsourcing, you might expect questions on that when it makes sense to outsource, like payroll, investigations, recruiting, and how to manage it. And then HR metrics, for example, HR staff per full-time employee, customer satisfaction scores, balanced scorecard. These show up in effectiveness and service delivery questions. So for the SHRM exam strategy, think like SHRM. What delivers the most value, efficiency, and strategic alignment? And be familiar when to use each model. Centralized for control, decentralized for flexibility, shared services for consistency. And watch for case-style scenarios. For example, which model should an organization with 5 global offices use to streamline payroll? Okay, our next functional area is organizational effectiveness and development. And this is all about making the structure of an organization work smarter, not just harder. Okay, so key concepts we're going to go into. Group dynamics. So we've got intergroup and intragroup. Intergroup is between teams, for example, sales versus marketing conflicts. Intragroup is within a single team, so tension among finance team members. Group formation stages, we've got forming, storming, norming, performing. That's the Tuckman model. Forming is team members are polite, roles are unclear. Storming, conflict surfaces, power struggles. Norming is when roles are clarified and cohesion grows. And then performing is when team works efficiently and collaboratively. So then we have identity, cohesion structure, influence on behavior, and conflict. Cohesion is key for performance but can lead to groupthink, so you have to be careful about that. And SHRM often will test your ability to diagnose team development stages and recommend interventions. Next, let's get into organizational design structures and approaches. So we have customer structure, which is when the org is segmented based on client type. For example, small biz clients versus enterprise clients. Functional structure is a traditional structure, so HR, finance, ops, etc. And that's best for efficiency, but it can create silos. Geographic structure is based on region. So for example, North America might be a region. And this is good for local responsiveness, but risks duplication. And then we have the matrix structure. This is for dual reporting, functional plus project or regional, common in tech, consulting, or global organizations. And then you want to watch for role conflict or unclear authority. Program structure is organized by program or product line. So for example, an HR team split into programs like DEI, talent development, and wellness. So expect scenario questions like, which structure works best for a rapidly growing startup with multiple product lines? The answer would be program or matrix, depending on context. Next, we have organizational analysis. So performance analysis is identifying where things are underperforming. So for example, poor onboarding, misaligned training. The McKinsey 7S model is a strategic diagnostic tool for organizational alignment. 7S equals structure, strategy, systems, shared values, style, staff, and skills. This is useful when undergoing a major change or a merger. SHRM may ask about aligning these elements in change scenarios. So for example, a healthcare organization is expanding its telemedicine service. How can HR ensure that strategy, systems, and staff are aligned to support this? Real quick though, I want to double click on the McKinsey 7S model and break it down a little bit more for the SHRM. So this model divides into two categories. There's the hard elements, which are easier to define and change. And these are more tangible. So you can see them on org charts or in policies. So strategy is the organization's plan to achieve competitive advantage and respond to external changes. So for example, entering a new market, shifting to remote first, launching a DEI initiative, etc. Structure, which is the second S, is the way the organization is arranged. Organization charts, reporting relationships, hierarchies. So for example, a centralized structure versus a matrix team model. And then systems is day-to-day operations and processes. So payroll, performance management, ATS, communication channels, etc. Then you have the soft elements, and these are more difficult to define and change. These are intangible, rooted in people, culture, and mindset. So shared values is the core, the heart of the model. These are the organization's core values and culture. For example, a healthcare nonprofit might value compassion, community, and integrity. So style is the other S, the leadership approach and company culture. Is leadership authoritarian? Is it participative? Is it servant style? Then we have staff, and that's the workforce itself. Size, demographics, capabilities. Are employees highly skilled specialists or are they generalists? Do they align with the organization's needs? And last but not least, the seventh S is skills, the actual competencies employees possess, not just job titles, but actual ability. So a tech company may need strong problem solving and coding skills, while a luxury hotel needs hospitality and emotional intelligence. So how SHRM might test this: scenario-based questions. A company shifts to remote work, but performance drops. Leadership hasn't changed and systems are outdated. Which element is misaligned? Likely systems and possibly style if leadership doesn't support remote culture. If there's a change management focus, you may be asked how to align elements during a merger or transformation. For example, after a restructure, employees feel lost and leadership is unclear. What's missing? That would be style, shared values, and structure, and those might be all in conflict. And then there's cross-element connections. So you should recognize that all 7 elements influence one another. If strategy changes, but structure and skills stay the same, performance may drop. Okay, so let's switch gears. We're going to get into workforce management. As part of the organization knowledge domain, workforce management plays a critical role in making sure the right people are in the right roles at the right time, both today and tomorrow. SHRM emphasizes strategic thinking and practical planning here, so expect scenario-based questions that test how you would identify workforce gaps, reskill employees, or respond to organizational changes. You'll need to know models and strategies, but also apply them to real-world situations. So the main thing I want to focus on is the workforce planning approaches, techniques, and analyses. Examples including forecasting, which is anticipating future workforce needs based on turnover, growth, or external trends. So for example, a retail chain plans for seasonal spikes by forecasting hiring needs 6 months ahead. Then we have the build, buy, borrow, and bridge strategies. Build is training internally. Buy is hire externally. Borrow is use contractors. Bridge is transition or reskill. So for example, a hospital facing a nursing shortage may borrow via travel nurses and build by offering in-house certifications. Then there's the attrition, gap in solution, and supply and demand. So for example, a manufacturing company tracks retirement trends and realizes it must start training apprentices now to fill projected gaps. So the workforce profile is demographic skills, performance levels, etc. A university HR team uses profiles to plan faculty diversity initiatives, for example. Upskilling and reskilling employees. For example, a financial firm trains existing employees in data analytics instead of hiring new analysts. Redesigning jobs. An example of that is a logistics company redefines warehouse roles to include automation and supervision. And then robotics, understanding the impact of automation on workforce needs. So a tech-driven factory replaces manual labor with robotics, requiring fewer workers but more technicians. And then identifying high potential, high performance employees. A hotel chain uses manager feedback and KPIs to identify future leaders for its GM pipeline, for example. Some tips for the exam. If a company is growing rapidly, build alone may be too slow, so consider combining buy plus build plus borrow. And know the difference between high performance, which have results today, and high potential, which is leadership ability tomorrow. And then apply workforce planning to different types of organizations: startups, nonprofits, government, unionized sectors, and think about how constraints or opportunities differ. Workforce management isn't just about filling vacancies, it's about seeing the big picture of organization capability. So SHRM wants you to act like a strategic partner, identifying gaps before they hurt performance. Okay, next up is employee and labor relations. SHRM emphasizes having a deep understanding of compliance, fairness, and conflict management with an ability to evaluate and respond to real-world scenarios. So SHRM wants you to be solution-oriented. You'll want to know the tools to handle conflict, understand your legal obligations, and recognize how your HR decisions influence morale, culture, and risk. So let's get into types of alternative dispute resolution, or ADR, and their advantages and disadvantages. We have mediation, which is when a neutral third party facilitates a discussion but doesn't make a decision. So, for example, two employees in a nonprofit disagree over work boundaries. HR brings in a mediator to help them reach a consensus. Then there's arbitration, which is when a neutral third party hears both sides and makes a binding or non-binding decision. For example, a software engineer alleges wrongful termination, and the employment contract requires binding arbitration. So the pros and cons: ADR is generally cheaper and faster than litigation, but may be seen as less transparent or employee-friendly depending on the method. Then we have causes of and methods for preventing and addressing strikes, lockouts, and boycotts causes. So we have unfair labor practices, which, for example, retaliation for union activity. I'm sorry for the noise in the background. We have economic grievances, for example, disputes over wages, benefits, and working conditions. So prevention and response methods: we have a strike response plan, which is a business continuity strategy when work stops. So for example, a manufacturing plant develops a plan that includes cross-training supervisors on production tasks. Then we have hiring temp workers, which can be controversial, must comply with legal guidelines. For example, a hospital uses licensed per diem nurses during a labor strike to maintain patient care. Then we have protection of non-striking employees, which is ensuring safety and freedom from retaliation. So a warehouse sets up a designated parking and escorts for employees who choose to cross picket lines. And then supply chain contingency plans, keeping operations running if a strike affects inputs. So a restaurant chain adjusts menus and suppliers during a meat packers strike, for example. So you want to know the differences between mediation and arbitration, especially binding versus non-binding arbitration, and then understand what triggers a strike and how HR should respond while remaining compliant. Expect scenario-based questions. SHRM may ask what the first step should be when a strike is announced or when a complaint about retaliation is made. So employee and labor relations is where empathy meets compliance. Knowing the rules is essential, but applying them in a fair, strategic way is what SHRM is testing for. Okay, so the next section is technology management. Technology management focuses on how HR leverages tools, both old and emerging, to streamline processes, safeguard information, and enhance service delivery. So whether it's automating onboarding, analyzing performance data, or crafting a social media policy, this functional area ensures that HR keeps pace with digital transformation. Expect SHRM to test your understanding of key terms like ATS, or applicant tracking software, HRIS, which is human resources information system, LMS, which is a learning management system, and buzzwords like AI, machine learning, blockchain, etc. But also, you need an ability to apply these tools responsibly. So you'll need to know about data privacy and security protocols. Think cloud backups, BYOD policy, etc. Self-service platforms like for timekeeping, benefits, contact info, stuff like that. Social media usage, both internally and externally. The real focus is how HR can efficiently manage talent and protect sensitive data in a tech-driven world. So SHRM likes questions about balancing access with confidentiality or implementing tech while maintaining compliance and communication. So knowing the basics of data integrity and internet usage policies is key. Okay, and there you have it. Now that we've explored the full organization knowledge domain, from HR structure and effectiveness to labor relations and emerging technologies, you should have a clearer sense of how HR drives alignment between people, process, and strategy. So SHRM will test your ability to not only recall key models like the 7S framework, McKinsey's diagnostic tools, and job architecture strategies, but to apply them in a real world, often nuanced context. So whether you're asked to restructure a department, bridge a skills gap, navigate a union dispute, or introduce a new HRIS, this domain challenges you to think like a strategic partner, someone who strengthens the infrastructure behind workforce success. So, closing thoughts. When you see organization knowledge domain on your exam, remember you're being evaluated. You're being evaluated not just on what HR does, but how it delivers results across the layer of the organization. You've got this. Let's keep going. Tomorrow, we're going to get into the workplace knowledge domain. So stick with me and happy studying. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.